Hello, my name is Justin Kain. I'm a Chicagoland real estate investor, and today we're here to talk about Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. Now, cash flow is the lifeblood of any business and pretty much very, very important to anybody who is an adult and living in the United States. Now, Robert says that there's 4 ways to make money, so that's why it's called a quadrant. He even wrote a book about it. It's called the Cashflow Quadrant. And the first time I read it, I was just blown away by the simplicity of the concept, but how important it is. Now, there's 4 areas in the quadrant. Basically, there's 4 ways that people in the United States make money. The first way is the most common, and it's called being an employee. E stands for employee, and this is where most people focus their efforts when they're in college, when they're in school. They want to get a job. The second area is called self-employment, and this is where your doctors, your accountants, your attorneys, many people who are self-employed may have a business, but they don't really have systems that leverage their time being a self-employed person. Now we're going to move to the right-hand side of the quadrant where we have business owners. And this can be big business or small business. The thing that separates a self-employed person from a business owner is the systems, the quality and the quantity of the systems that these people over here have and use on a daily basis. Now on the bottom right-hand side, we're going to have I. That stands for investors. I is probably the last area where you're going to be ending up, but as an investor, you probably make the most money. Alright, now that we know the 4 areas where people make money, let's figure out where that cash flow comes from. We're going to start with employee. Most employees trade their time for money. So basically, whether you get paid an hourly rate, a weekly rate, or a yearly rate called a salary, you're trading money, or you're trading your time for money. And this is how most of the world works. Down here for self-employed people, people trade their projects for money. So let's say that you're a graphic artist and you have a project to do. You would get paid for doing that project. Or maybe you're an attorney. You would get paid for doing that case, and that's how you would be billing your time out. That's how people make money on the left-hand side. It's very different on the right-hand side because over here, business owners make money on their systems. So whether they have 10 people call in every day or 1,000 people call in every day, they're leveraging their systems to make themselves money on a daily basis. Our investors over here make money on their assets. And this is a very, very cool concept because they make money just by owning the asset that is being paid for. So let's take an example of each one. Let's say that we're just getting out of college and we're a college student trying to make some money. Let's say that somebody offered us $50 per hour. That would be a great job, right? Well, $50 an hour times 40 hours a week times 50 weeks a year would mean that we are making approximately $100,000 each year. And I would say that most people right now would just love to make $100,000 a year if they're just getting out of school. That's a very, very good paying job. And it goes from $50 an hour all the way down to minimum wage that employees get paid for their time. Now, projects. Let's say that you're an attorney and you're doing a project, or you're an accountant. You might get paid $400 to prepare somebody's tax return. Or if you're a mechanic, you might get paid $300 to do a brake project. So they get paid by the project. But if we jump over here to business owners, let's think about a business that everybody knows about in the United States. Let's think about McDonald's. They have a system, and people plug into their systems. They may buy a franchise or maybe corporate owned, but let's say you sell 1,000 hamburgers in a day. It's just as easy to sell 1,000 as it is to sell 10,000. That's called leverage. And business owners make money by leveraging themselves through their systems. Now, the bottom right-hand side of the triangle is called I for investors. These people down here make money just by owning the assets that people use every day. So again, let's use the McDonald's example. If you own a McDonald's, you just own the building. You don't own the land underneath it. That's what corporate McDonald's owns. Corporate McDonald's has their headquarters about 15 minutes away from my office here in Oak Brook, Illinois, and they own all the land under the McDonald's all over the United States. So whether you're in San Francisco or in New York, they're getting paid just by owning the assets. Now, let's talk about the division of where all the money goes in the United States. Most of the money is on this side of the quadrant. So if we put all the money over here, let's say 95% of the money is over on the right-hand side of the quadrant. But then we go back, where are all the people? 95% of the people are over here on the left-hand side of the quadrant. When I found this out, I was just, let me give that guy an eye there. I was blown away because I was like, why would 95% of the people pursue 5% of the money? It's just amazing the amount of money that people will work for on the left-hand side of the quadrant. Why do they do that? Well, I'm going to answer that question in just a second. It's amazing to me also that 5% of the people, they control 95% of the money. Now, is there something that the people on the right-hand side of the quadrant know, the business owners and the investors, that the people on the left-hand side of the quadrant don't know, the employed people and the self-employed people? Well, I can answer that question through my own personal experience. You see, I've been able to travel through each one of the areas of the cash flow quadrant, and now I live on the right-hand side as opposed to living on the left-hand side. I started off as a band teacher, and as a band teacher, when I was 21 years old, I was making a whopping $35,400 per year. Now that was as an employee. Now, I love my job, and I think maybe some employees do love their job, but how much is that for being able to support a family, for being able to buy a car, a house? It just wasn't a whole lot of money. So I had to add being self-employed to that. I became self-employed. I moved from being an employee to being self-employed. I started doing gigs, and I would play my trumpet, I would play at church, I would play at the local pub on Friday night, and I would get paid, let's say $100 to $300 for doing that. So I was getting paid for doing projects. But then I discovered a new business. I discovered, like many of you in the direct sales or the MLM industry, I started my own business. And I know a lot of people are not successful with that because we're still thinking in terms of being an employee, and now we're self-employed. And that was my whole thought process. It wasn't until I started reading books and getting educated as a self-employed person that I started to see that just by being self-employed didn't necessarily mean that I was going to be able to leverage myself enough to make the money that I wanted to make on the right-hand side of the quadrant. You see, I wanted to have the time freedom available to me to travel. I wanted to be able to go away from my business and have it come back and have it be doing better than it was before. So as a self-employed person, I had to start thinking differently than I was before as an employee. So I thought differently to get to being self-employed, but then making the transition to where I was actually a business owner, where I had leveraged systems, where I was working with a company where I could get paid on a leveraged compensation plan, where I could get paid for setting up the systems in my business. Let me tell you about a business that I've set up. I have a management company, and on that management company, every time we perform a service, we get paid $75. Our system, as it gets bigger and bigger, we can make more and more money, and it doesn't take any more of my time in order to manage that. That's the big difference between being self-employed and being a business owner, is that you have a leveraged system that you can plug into. Just think about the McDonald's example that we used before. Whether you own 1 McDonald's or 10 McDonald's or 100 McDonald's, you're leveraging yourself through the use of that system. And that's what we get paid on as business owners. Now, let's move to the most sophisticated level of the quadrant, which is where we get paid on our assets. Now, what I've been able to do through business ownership and real estate investing and getting educated is I've been able to purchase and maintain over 35 rental properties. Those assets pay me on a monthly basis. So renters live in the rental houses, and every month when they pay their rent check, some of that money goes back into my systems and some of that money pays me. You see, it's kind of like a wealth cycle. As the rent gets paid for my investments, I pay that money back into my systems and make better systems. Then the better systems make more money to roll into more assets. And this is how, when you hear the phrase, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, it's actually true. Because most of the time, people that aren't wealthy are living over here, trading their time for dollars, trying to get from that $10 an hour job to maybe $15 an hour, or trying as a self-employed person to get from $300 for a tax return to $400 for a tax return. And they're not thinking about the systems that are available to them on this side of the quadrant. When you think about the fact that 95% of the people chase 5% of the money, and 5% of the people chase 95% of the money, I think it's obvious that this, being on the right-hand side, is the place to be. And that's where we've been able to get to. So if you've decided to move from the left-hand side of the quadrant as an employee or self-employed person to the right-hand side of the quadrant, where all the money is, then I want you to click on the Get Started Now link on this page. Thank you for listening to the Robert Kiyosaki Cashflow Quadrant as explained by Justin Kain.